The alarm on my dialysis machine didn't just beep, it screamed. A high-pitched metallic shriek that sounded less like a warning and more like a dying robot. 1 second, I was watching a rerun of some cooking show. The next, the world went dark. My medical lifeline, the machine that kept me from having to explain to a nurse why I tried to live on a diet of nothing but stale Cheetos and cheap beer, just died. The silence that followed was the real killer. And I knew, with the kind of certainty you get when you've been dealing with a Karen for a year, who was responsible. I sat there for a second, the blood still moving through the tubes connecting me to the now silent machine. The room was bathed in the kind of twilight only a sudden power outage can create. My phone, which was charging, also went dead, the screen a black mirror reflecting my panicked face. I'd be lying if I said a little bit of my heart didn't jump into my throat. The rules for my at-home dialysis were clear. If the power went out, I had a short window to either get it back on or get myself to a hospital. 4 minutes, to be precise, before things started to go from mildly inconvenient to, let's call the nearest ambulance and get our affairs in order. I could feel the clock ticking in my chest. But panic? Nah, I was a man of plans. You don't live on the edge of medical disaster without a contingency for everything. I've got backup batteries for my phone, a battery-powered flashlight duct-taped to a broom handle in case of an apocalypse, and a detailed, laminated flowchart for every possible medical emergency. And when your neighbor is the self-appointed queen of the HOA, you plan for her too. I unhooked myself from the machine with the practiced speed of a man who's done it 1,000 times, my movements a little more hurried than usual. I grabbed my old flip phone, which I kept charged and in a Faraday cage, just for this kind of situation. I punched in a number and held it to my ear. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah, Frank, what's up? I'm in the middle of a foundation pour." "Danny," I said, my voice calm. "It's her, she did it." A sigh came through the phone. "Karen again? What'd she do this time, say your lawn's a micron too tall?" "Worse. She cut my power." I glanced at the useless dialysis machine. "I've got a 4-minute countdown." A beat of silence. "You're not messing with me, are you? Because this ain't funny." "I'm deadly serious. Literally. I need the trailer, the big one, with the industrial battery. I need you to get it here now." Danny, my old buddy from high school who now owned a thriving construction company, knew me well enough to know when to drop the sarcasm. He'd helped me out of plenty of scrapes before, though none this life-threatening. "You got it, buddy. I'll be there in 5. Don't die before I get there. The paperwork's a nightmare." I hung up, a small, grim smile on my face. That was Phase 1. Phase 2 was dealing with the immediate fallout. I went to the front window and peered out. Sure enough, standing on her lawn, hands on her hips, was Karen. She had a self-satisfied smirk on her face. Her perfectly manicured fingers were pointing at my house, as if to say, "I got him." She was wearing a matching visor and sweatsuit, the uniform of a woman who believes her civic duty is to make everyone else miserable. Her name, I should probably mention, was Carol, but nobody in the neighborhood called her that. She was just Karen. She had made it her personal mission to enforce a set of HOA bylaws that felt like they were written by a Victorian ghost. She'd once sent me a certified letter for leaving my garbage cans out for an unapproved duration, which turned out to be an extra 3 minutes. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the suburban silence, a siren. Not the gentle wail of an ambulance, but the sharp, urgent blare of a police car. I knew Karen had called them. She probably claimed I was trying to steal her community power, or something equally absurd. 2 officers, a tall, tired-looking man, and a younger, more energetic woman pulled up and got out. Karen, her smirk now replaced with a righteous glare, marched over to them, pointing at my house like it was a criminal enterprise. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my shirt. This was going to be a long day. I opened the front door just as the officers were walking up my driveway. The taller one, whose name tag read Officer Gibson, gave a nod. "Mr. Johnson, we got a call about a public disturbance. Something about a power outage?" "That would be me," I said, gesturing inside. "And that's the cause." I led them into my living room and pointed to the dead dialysis machine. The younger officer, Officer Davis, looked at it with a mix of curiosity and concern. Officer Gibson, however, looked more interested in the HOA meeting minutes I had neatly piled on a nearby table. "So, what happened here exactly?" Gibson asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "Uh-huh." Karen's voice suddenly screeched from the doorway. She must have followed the cops. "He's making it up. It's an eyesore. He's causing a power surge to mess with the whole neighborhood." I turned to her, a calm smile on my face. "Officer, I believe she's referring to Rule 4.1, Community Aesthetics. She believes my medical equipment, a life-sustaining device, is an unapproved structure and, I quote, brings down the value of the homes in the subdivision. I've got the email right here." I pointed to a binder labeled Karen's Greatest Hits. Officer Gibson shot Karen a look that told her to be quiet. He turned back to me. "Sir, can you explain what happened?" "Sure," I said, leaning against my now useless dialysis machine. Karen, in her infinite wisdom, apparently decided that cutting the power to my house would be a valid way to get me to comply with her demands. She claims I have too many Christmas lights on my porch, even though it's July. The power to just my house is out. The rest of the neighborhood is fine. I'm on a medical machine that, well, keeps me alive. So I'm guessing she messed with my breaker box. Karen's face went crimson. "I did no such thing. You're making it up. It's a blatant violation of neighborhood covenants." Officer Davis, the younger one, was looking at me with a genuinely sympathetic expression. "Sir, do you have proof?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I've got a solution coming, and it's going to be a real eye-opener for everyone involved." As if on cue, a rumbling sound started in the distance. It wasn't the sound of an ambulance or a fire truck. It was the low, throaty growl of a massive diesel engine, getting louder by the second. The three of us, me, Officer Gibson, and the apoplectic Karen, walked out onto the porch. And that's when we saw it. Rumbling down the street was a vehicle of truly epic proportions. It was a massive flatbed trailer, the kind you see hauling transformers or heavy construction equipment. But this one was different. On the back, bolted to the frame, was a battery the size of a small car. Wires, thick as my wrist, snaked out of it, and a large generator sat next to it. And at the wheel of the truck, pulling it, was Danny, my old buddy, with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. He gave me a wink as he pulled up, the truck groaning to a stop directly in front of my house. Karen's jaw dropped. The rulebook she was holding slipped from her hands and fell to the ground with a quiet thud. This was going to be a fun day. The truck's engine finally sputtered to a halt, a plume of diesel smoke momentarily obscuring Karen's horrified face. Danny hopped out of the cab, his work boots hitting the pavement with a satisfying thud. He was a mountain of a man, built like a brick outhouse and dressed in a grease-stained Danny's Construction t-shirt. "Hey, Frank!" he bellowed, his voice loud enough to make the birds scatter. "Hope I'm not too late for the party. This beauty's got enough juice to power a small village, much less what do you call that thing? A kidney-o-matic?" I gave him a tired smile. "It's a dialysis machine, Danny, and you're just in time." Karen, having recovered from her initial shock, stomped forward, her face a mask of pure indignation. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. You can't just park that monstrosity on this street. It's an eyesore. It's a blatant violation of neighborhood covenants." Danny took one look at her, then back at me, and let out a booming laugh. "This the Karen you were talking about, Frank? She looks exactly like you described. Little bit of a chip on her shoulder, huh?" Officer Gibson cleared his throat, stepping between the two of them. "Ma'am, please, let's try to keep this civil." "Civil?" Karen screeched, gesturing wildly at the trailer. "That thing is a disgrace. Rule 7.3, vehicle and trailer parking, clearly states that no recreational vehicle or trailer may be parked on a residential street or driveway for more than 48 hours. Oh, I'm well aware of Rule 7.3, Karen," I said, my voice calm. I'd spent countless hours studying the HOA bylaws. It was my hobby. "But this isn't a recreational vehicle. It's a mobile power source for a medical device. To keep me from, dying." I turned to Gibson and Davis. "Officers, this is a medical emergency. I'm not just parking a trailer. I'm deploying a life-saving piece of equipment. As such, I believe it falls under a different category." Danny, meanwhile, was already directing his two crew members, who had arrived in a separate truck. "All right, boys, let's get this show on the road. Frank's got a clock ticking, and I'm not in the mood to do a eulogy." The crew, a couple of young guys who looked like they lived on energy drinks and sarcasm, immediately got to work. They unhitched the massive trailer from Danny's truck, the sound of metal on metal echoing down the street. Karen watched in horror as they maneuvered the trailer with practiced ease, parking it directly in my driveway, the colossal battery pack facing my house. "You can't do this," Karen wailed. "I'm calling the city. I'm calling the fire department. I'm calling my lawyer." "You do that, Karen," I said with a shrug, pulling out my own copy of the HOA bylaws from my back pocket. It was tattered and dog-eared, a testament to the past year of my life. In the meantime, my friends are going to do a little wiring for me. You see, the HOA bylaws, while extensive, don't have a rule for emergency medical equipment of a mobile nature. Officer Gibson, clearly tired of the whole situation, spoke up. "Ma'am, for the time being, this looks like a medical necessity. He has a right to ensure his well-being. Unless he's actually causing a disturbance, which he's not, we're not going to get involved." Officer Davis, who had been watching the whole spectacle with a growing smile, chimed in. "And ma'am, it's not a trailer. It's a backup battery on wheels. There's a subtle but important difference." I gave Davis a mental high five. She got it. Karen, realizing she was losing the battle on multiple fronts, took a different approach. "Fine. But that thing had better be gone in 48 hours. I'll be counting?" "Oh, it's not going anywhere, Karen," I replied with a slow smile. "Not until I'm absolutely certain that my power won't mysteriously turn off again." Danny and his crew, meanwhile, were a hive of activity. They were running thick cables from the battery trailer to my house's main power box. The entire process was loud, messy, and a beautiful act of defiance. The cops watched for a few more minutes, then gave a final nod and left, with Officer Gibson giving me a look that said, "Good luck, you're going to need it." Karen, now a lone figure of righteous fury, simply stood on her lawn, fuming, as the low hum of the generator on the trailer kicked in. The lights in my house flickered back on. I walked back inside, the sense of relief washing over me like a warm blanket. I re-hooked myself up to my dialysis machine, which whirred back to life. A sense of peace, one I hadn't felt in a year, settled over me. Karen had picked a fight with the wrong guy. She had messed with my power, and now I had more of it than I knew what to do with. The real fun was just beginning. The hum of the generator was a sweet, defiant melody. My dialysis machine was purring contentedly, and the lights in my house were a beacon of stability in an otherwise absurd situation. Out my window, I could see Karen, still standing on her lawn, staring at the massive trailer in my driveway like it was a foreign spaceship that had just landed. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered my blood pressure was probably still sky high from the whole dying alone in a dark house thing, and the feeling passed. Suddenly, her phone came out. She was making calls. I could practically hear her shrieking into the receiver about code violations, unsightly structures, and electrical hazards. But I was ready. This wasn't my first rodeo with her. I'd already downloaded every single city ordinance and building code related to temporary structures and emergency power sources. It was all a part of my Living with Karen preparedness kit. A few hours later, a beat-up pickup truck pulled up, its side emblazoned with code enforcement. Out hopped a guy in a stained uniform who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Karen, spotting her ally, practically skipped over to him. "See?" she exclaimed, pointing dramatically at the trailer. "I told you, it's a code violation, a public nuisance." The code enforcement officer, a man with the weary eyes of someone who deals with neighborhood feuds for a living, just sighed. He walked over to the trailer, squinted at the giant battery pack, and then walked around the back, inspecting the connections. He then pulled out a clipboard and started scribbling. Karen's face was a study in smug satisfaction. She was practically preening. "He's writing you a ticket," she mouthed to me through the window. "You're going to pay, Frank." But the officer walked away from the trailer and straight to my front door. I opened it before he could even knock. "Mr. Johnson?" he said, adjusting his glasses. "I'm with code enforcement. Got a complaint about a parked trailer." "And?" I asked, my voice as neutral as possible. He looked down at his clipboard. "And everything seems to be up to snuff. It's properly grounded, the generator is a low-emissions model, and it's classified as a temporary medical support system. There are no city ordinances against that. It's a bit unconventional, but it's not illegal. I did, however, have to give the lady across the street a warning about harassment. She kept trying to get me to cite you for your uncompliant mailbox, even though it meets all postal regulations." He gave a final, tired sigh and walked back to his truck. Karen's triumphant smile had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated fury. She watched him drive off, then turned her incandescent rage on me. That's when she started yelling. "You're ruining this neighborhood! You and that thing are bringing down property values! I'm going to call every single person in the HOA. You'll see." I just smiled and waved. The battle was far from over, but the first major volley had just been fired, and I was still standing. A few days later, the war of attrition began. My driveway became a public spectacle. Karen started a new campaign, this time targeting the neighbors. She'd walk her dog extra slowly past my house, giving a wide, disgusted berth to the trailer and whispering to anyone who would listen. She even started leaving passive-aggressive notes in the neighborhood mailbox cluster about respecting the aesthetic integrity of our community. But she had underestimated my planning. As soon as Danny parked the trailer, I had called a different buddy, a lawyer who specialized in property law. His advice was simple. "You've got a medical necessity. The HOA can't do a thing. But if she tries to come on your property or mess with your stuff, that's trespassing. Document everything." So I did. I installed a camera on my porch, pointed directly at the trailer. It was all legal, of course. My front yard, my camera. I also started a neighborhood group chat on my phone, titled HOA Survivors, and invited all the neighbors who had ever complained about Karen. The messages were full of funny anecdotes about her, but it also served a purpose. It was a running log of her petty grievances and our shared suffering. The final showdown happened at the next HOA meeting. Karen, of course, was presiding. She had a new, much larger binder of complaints against me, all centered on the unsightly trailer. She called the meeting to order, and her first agenda item was the Frank Johnson nuisance. She started her speech, her voice dripping with self-importance. Mr. Johnson has taken it upon himself to violate our neighborhood covenants with a gross display of machinery. It is an eyesore, a blight, and a stain on our community. She then started reading off a list of fabricated complaints about loud humming from the generator. It was a quiet model. Excessive cables, all tucked neatly into conduit, and unapproved modifications. The trailer was a temporary vehicle. But as she spoke, I simply sat there, a calm smile on my face, my dog-eared copy of the bylaws sitting on the table in front of me. I let her speak for a full 10 minutes, letting the rest of the weary neighbors listen to her ridiculous tirade. Finally, she finished, panting slightly, her face red with exertion. And so I moved that Mr. Johnson be fined $1,000 and ordered to remove the trailer within 24 hours. There was a murmur in the room. Some of the neighbors looked sympathetic, others just looked bored. "I object," I said calmly, raising my hand. Karen scoffed. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of Rule 7.3, I said, pointing to the line in my bylaw book. It states that no recreational vehicle or trailer may be parked on a residential street or driveway for more than 48 hours. "Exactly," she crowed, "and your trailer has been there for over a week." "Ah, but you see," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "It's not a recreational vehicle or trailer. I had a lawyer look at this. It's a mobile power unit for medical equipment. It's a vehicle in the same way a fire truck is a vehicle. Its primary purpose is to address an emergency. It's not for recreation. It's for survival. So, Rule 7.3 doesn't apply." I then pulled out a laminated list of city and state statutes from my bag, all highlighted, all perfectly legal. "And," I continued, "I also found a clause in the bylaws, Rule 12.4. It states that any decision by the board that impedes a resident's ability to receive life-sustaining medical care is subject to immediate review by all members and may be grounds for board member removal. You, Karen, have deliberately and maliciously turned off my power, knowing I was on a medical device. That's not just a violation of the HOA. That's a crime." The room went silent. Karen's face went from red to a ghostly white. The jig was up. The room was silent, save for the low hum of the fluorescent lights. All eyes were on Karen, who looked like she'd just seen a ghost. My calm delivery of facts, backed up by months of meticulous research, had completely deflated her. The other neighbors, many of whom had suffered under her petty tyranny for years, were now looking at her with a mix of surprise and dawning hope. "You can't prove that," she finally stammered, her voice a shadow of its usual shriek. "Actually, I can," I said, pulling out my phone and tapping a few times. "I have a video recording of you telling the police officers that you turned off my power to teach me a lesson. I'll be happy to share it with the room." A collective gasp went around the room. Karen's face was now a mask of pure terror. She stood up, knocking her chair over with a clatter. "This meeting is adjourned," she yelled, and then without another word, she fled the room. The remaining neighbors, a few of whom were now openly laughing, looked at me, a silent hero. The meeting was a mess, but the message was clear. The reign of Karen was over. In the days that followed, the neighborhood transformed. The massive battery trailer, which I'd jokingly named the Guardian, became a symbol of our new freedom. Danny's crew, loving the drama, had indeed beautified it. They'd painted a mural on the side, a cartoon superhero version of me, wearing a dialysis mask and a cape, zapping a tiny, angry figure with a lightning bolt. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive art. and Karen's absence was felt immediately. The neighborhood group chat, once a place for hushed whispers, was now a lively forum for people sharing funny anecdotes about her, and more importantly, actually getting things done. We collectively decided to re-elect the HOA board, and they, in a moment of pure genius, asked me to join. I declined, of course. I'd rather deal with my own medical issues than a bunch of other people's problems. But I did agree to be the consultant on all things bylaws, a title I was particularly proud of. The story's conclusion didn't come with a bang, but with a quiet, satisfying hum. A few weeks after the fateful meeting, a U-Haul truck pulled up to Karen's house. I watched from my window as she and her long-suffering husband loaded boxes. She was wearing sunglasses, probably to avoid eye contact with anyone. She was a defeated queen, exiled from her own kingdom. The morning she left, I was in my living room, getting my dialysis done. My machine was humming along, powered not by the Guardian, but by the neighborhood grid. Danny had already come and removed the trailer, and the street was back to its quiet, suburban self. As she pulled out of her driveway, she didn't look over. She didn't wave. She just drove away. My life, which had become a year-long battle of wills, was finally returning to normal. My dialysis machine was once again just a medical device, not a pawn in a petty war. The HOA was now run by a group of sensible people who cared more about community than about the exact shade of beige on my mailbox. The air in my neighborhood felt cleaner, freer, and more breathable. The final scene is of me sitting in my living room, my dialysis machine quietly humming. I look out the window at the empty house across the street. The sun is shining. My phone buzzes with a new message from the neighborhood group chat. It's a picture of a newly planted flower bed in a previously neglected common area. A neighbor has started a community garden, and they're asking for volunteers. I smiled. A genuine smile this time. It was a new beginning. I had fought a war just to get some peace and quiet, and I had won. And the best part? I didn't even have to write a thank you note to the woman who started the whole thing.